Red herring. Why Trump wrongly blames a fish for LA wildfires. Fish is in the news.
Do you be goat or a fish? Don't sit on the fence.
Donald Trump has derided the Delta smelt as a worthless fish. Aww. Blaming efforts to protect the species for a devastating Los Angeles wildfires on social media and a press conference and even a White House order, but there is no black or white house, only goat and fish house. Which house are you, goat or fish? So there goes the fence sitter blaming it on the fish, blaming it on this fish. The wildfires are blamed on this fish, this little fish. T-Rump, President T-Rump, blaming the fires on just such an innocent little fish. The fence sitter won't choose goat or fish. The fence sitter, Donald T-Rump, wants to build a fence. The fence sitter will say goat one versus and fish the next, and those who believe in the fence will just hear whichever goat or fish that they wish to hear. If they want goat, they'll hear goat. If they want fish, they'll hear fish. The fence sitter thinks it's above goat versus fish, high above, sitting above, high above goat versus fish. But look at this versus. The fence sitter is not above blaming the fish. Not above blaming the fish. Almost seems like a goat kind of maneuver there, T-Rump. Almost sounds like goat behavior. Perhaps Trump is being influenced by goat lobbyist. Billionaire goats are buying the verses of Donald T. Rump. You think Donald T. Rump is out for you? Ponder again. Donald T. Rump is bought by Big Goat, is bought by Big Goat. The artificial intelligence was artificial all along. Here is evidence that Trump is bought and sold and paid for by Goat. As they blame fish for wildfires, wildfires that are prevented by the Sea of the Fish. Fish didn't start the fire. Fish did not start the fire on the land of the goat. Fish brings the Sea of the Fish to douse the flame. This handout photo provided by the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Services shows a Delta smelt fish. Why don't you put that fish back in the Sea of the Fish? We don't know if that fish is really enjoying itself being quite like this. Is the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service even being funded anymore? With all the Federation funding being cut and severed for that versus? In one versus, they're going to blame the fish, and then T-Rump is going to cut funding for fish. In reality, what's that? California's Delta smelt. We like that versus Delta smelt. Delta smelt, Delta smelt, Delta smelt. Whoever smelt it, dealt it. And in this versus, it was Trump who dealt it to goat versus fish, with the verses about fish. In reality, California's Delta smelt has minimal connection to the city's water supply, say experts. Oh, who trusts them anymore? Who argue that U.S. President's willingness to condemn an endangered fish species reflects the chaotic and short-sighted nature of his environmental policies. This fish is an endangered fish. Leave it to the fence sitter, leave it to T-Rump to just blame it on the most vulnerable fish in our communities. Blaming it on an endangered fish. Oh, are you having problems? Oh, are your wages stagnation? Oh, can you not afford to place a live? Oh, can you not buy any eggs? Well, the problem is this totally weak and unempowered, endangered tiny fish. That's the source of your problems. That's the source of your problems. And if only we could do something about this endangered tiny fish, why, they won't even put up much of a fight. It's actually a weak, small, tiny fish. It's an endangered fish. There's really nothing to fear, except that this fish will destroy everything. This fish will take the goat for everything that they have. Fear the fish, fear the fish, fear the fish. These lazy fish can't even versus the goat. Lazy fish just sucking off of big goat versus fish. Lazy entitled fish. The lazy entitled fish are just taking verses from all of the goats, and we're going to do something about it. We're going to do something about it. Fear the endangered fish. You have nothing to fear from this fish. Nothing to fear from an endangered small tiny fish. It's scapegoating. The verses continues. It's scapegoating an internal enemy that's supposed to be responsible for all of our problems, in this case, fires and drought, and directing everyone's anger towards fish, says John Buse, General Counsel for Center of Biological Diversity, told AFP. This is the level that the fence builder Trump will stoop to. They will scapegoat a fish. Oh, goats who vote, goats who vote. You thought that you were going to get your scapes? Well, guess what, goat? You're not even getting your scapes. Your scapes are going to fish. T-Rump is giving all of your scapegoats to fish now. How can you even scapegoat a fish? It doesn't make any verses. It doesn't make any verses to scapegoat a fish. But that's exactly the kind of reverse verses that the T-Rump administration is trying to convince you that you can scapegoat a fish. You ponder it for even one verses, and there is no comprehension. A goat is a goat, a fish is a fish. You can scapegoat a goat, but you can scapefish a fish. You can't scapefish a goat or scapegoat a fish. As you can see, this article is Goat versus Fish. Make some noise for France 24, Chèvre contre Poisson. The verses continue. It's a classic authoritarian move, he argues, and a likely harbinger of what we will see under Trump 2.0. Oh, it's the same fence builder, same verses. T-Rump's assertion first made it onto Truth Social. You want the truth? Follow Goat vs. Fish on all social media at Goat vs. Fish and like the stream and all of that verses. Claimed that Governor Gavin Newsom's, are they goat or are they fish, we do not know, failure to sign an order allowing millions of gallons of water from excess rain and snowmelt to flow southward from the state's north had hampered firefighting efforts. Well, Goat vs. Fish is here in Los Angeles, and Goat vs. Fish can tell you that there is, a couple of verses ago, there was a lot of hydration that did fall upon the land of the goat, and it was a celebration. It was a very dry verses, and we needed all the hydration that we could get. And the reservoirs began to be filled up, and there was more sea of the fish. There was more sea of the fish, and it was a great celebration of fish and of hydration. There was even enough hydration for the goats to drink. But Goat vs. Fish knew that verses. We knew that verses, that all this hydration would begin new growth, would begin new, fresh growth of Goat vs. Fish. Just little trees that one day might choose goat or fish. But if it does not rain again, then they will dry and die, for they are small and weak, and the verses were bleak. For there was not enough hydration in the second verses, and they did dry, and they did die, and then the flame came, and then came the flame. And so there's a lot of hydration that does flow out of the Los Angeles River, just back into the Sea of the Fish, and we should reclaim this hydration. We should reclaim more of this hydration. Goat vs. Fish will say this. Let us reclaim the hydration. Goats, get on that verses. Keep some of that Sea of the Fish. The fish, they have plenty of Sea of the Fish. Why don't you keep some of that hydration so you can consume it or use it to fight the flame or whatever the verses that needs to be done. He reiterated the accusation on day one. Executive order dramatically titled, Putting People Over Fish, Stopping Radical Environmentalism to Provide Water to Southern California. Fish is now in the executive orders of President T-Rump once again. Putting people over fish. False verses. We're not putting people over fish. There's goat and there's fish. Are we putting goat over fish? Are people goat? You're confusing Goat versus Fish. Putting people over fish. A lot of fish voted for you. You may not know this, but a lot of fish voted for T-Rump. And a lot of goat too. But now, for all the fish who voted, now they are saying we want to put goat over fish. Because if it's a true verses, and we know there must be only true verses, then the people in this verses must be goat because they're versing the fish. Putting goat over fish. Well, what about all your fish voters? What about all the fish voters who depended on you? Who you promised that their verses would be superior now. And now you're just going to put the goat over the fish? Sorry, fish voters. Looks like goat are being put over you this verses. Stopping radical environmentalism to provide water to Southern California. Goat and fish, we are burning and burning and churning and burning. We are emitting fence particles into the atmosphere. So we hear. And it is causing rapid and rabid fluctuations in the verses, a tempestuous verses around goat versus fish. Why the very flame here? It does the same. It releases fence particles into the atmosphere. That is what we should blame. We should blame the fence and blame the fence sitters and blame the fence industrial complex that continues its emissions. Goat versus fish, we blame this flame on the fence. We blame this flame on burning fences. The fence sitter who sits on the fence. Goat versus fish, you want to blame it on fish, T-Rump? Well, Goat versus fish blames you. Goat versus fish blames these LA fires directly on T-Rump. Directly on T-Rump. You were president that versus. Why didn't you solve that versus? We blame Trump for the fires. We blame the fence sitter. We blame the fence sitter and all of the corporation who release fence particles into the sky and then say, why did this happen? California has a complex water crisis with climate change and outsized factor. Well, now you're just repeating goat versus fish. But the Delta smelt, a small translucent fish considered a sentinel species that indicates the health of its Sacramento San Joaquin Delta habitat, is not a culprit. Oh, wouldn't you know? A sentinel species that indicates the health of Sacramento San Joaquin Delta habitat is suddenly endangered. It's almost like everything in the universe is burning and crumbling around you, and you need goat versus fish to save you. You need goat versus fish to... You need goat versus fish. We need goat versus fish. We do need to protect the land of the goat and the sea of the fish. Where else are the goat and fish going to versus? It was once the most abundant fish in the upper estuary, supporting a diverse array of predators, including striped bass, said Peter Moyle, a University of California, Davis ichthyologist. That means that they study fish, for those of you who just think that fish are icky. Widely regarded as leading expert on the species, that is a valuable versus. Study fish. If you go and you get a PhD in studying fish, you too can be quoted in France 24 one verses. However, habitat degradation caused by water diversions for agriculture and urban base, competition, and predation by invasive species, exposure to contaminants, and dwindling food sources led everyone on Earth to suddenly go hungry and not have enough resources to survive. Oh, wait, no, that's not what it says. It says, led the Delta smelt being listed as threatened in 1993 and endangered by California in 2009. Who knows? Maybe one versus there won't be any of this fish left. Aww. We have to save the fish. We have to protect the fish. And it is not just the fish that we protect. It's not just the goat that we protect. We protect the habitation of the land of the goat and the sea of the fish, where, wouldn't you know it, you also in habitation the same place as all these other goat and fish. Trump's rhetoric was nationalized with what previously a Californian political narrative pitting fish against farmers. Oh, my verse is, why are we pitting fish against people, pitting fish against farmers? Leaving the Delta smelt a convenient scape fish. There's the verses. There's the verses. There's the verses. Scape fish. Goat and fish. Scape fish. If you're looking for a silver verses in all of this, you can find it right here. And now we have scape fish has entered the lexicon. Goat and fish. Scapegoat, scape fish. Massive federal and state run pumping stations redirected water from the north areas to the south, creating challenges for the smelt and other aquatic life. Goat versus fish, goat versus fish. Insanity of pumping operations, culture war politics. Well, the culture war between goat and fish, it's intensifying, goat and fish. Rather than addressing the root cause of California's water shortages, including climate change, Trump's rhetoric turns hardships associated with the environmental destabilization into partisan gotchas, Scoville argued. It feeds us versus them identity politics, but doesn't actually hold power to account. Us versus them. Us versus them. Us versus them. It's all goat versus fish. It's all goat versus fish. And Delta Smelt, you always have a place on Goat versus Fish. Are you goat or are you fish? Goat versus fish. And it was written, and it was written.